My daughter, Jessica, is getting married, and we're heading to a meet and greet with both families. When we entered the designated room, Jessica's in-laws-to-be, John and Linda, were already seated. They seemed to have been talking about something, as their faces wore an eerily amused smile. I wondered what was so funny as I looked at the table, and saw that there were settings for 3 on our side. I realized this was a sly way of harassing us, and said to myself, I see. Please have a seat. Oh, it's just the 2 of you? We're a single-parent family. I lifted the corners of my eyes and replied as calmly as I could. But Linda still had a lingering smile. Right, I remember now. Maybe you should take this in a Tupperware? It must be tough being in a single-parent household. Linda covered her mouth with her hand, trying to suppress her laughter. Despite her harsh words, I didn't even bat an eyelid. Seeing this, Jessica tapped my shoulder. That's terrible. Mom, let's go home. Why's that? If it means you have to suffer, I'd rather not get married. Touched by my daughter's kindness, I smiled and firmly said, That's not necessary. Just wait a moment. Then, a female staff member came from behind with a takeaway box the size of a lunchbox, offering it to Linda with the words, Please, take this with you. John and Linda were taken aback, looking surprised. If being low income is tough, please, take this. What? My name is Emily Johnson. I'm in my 50s, feeling the midpoint of my life deeply as I live in a slightly spacious 3-bedroom house with my daughter, Jessica. When Jessica is at school, the emptiness of the living room feels lonely. During such times, I make it a routine to prepare 2 cups of tea. One for me, and the other for my late husband. Looking at the cup I poured for him, I feel comforted, thinking he might be here with me. He passed away from cancer about 20 years ago, just when we were about to start treatment. Just before he passed away, while lying in bed, he implored me about our only daughter, Jessica. Please take good care of Jessica. She'll surely do great. At that time, Jessica was too young to remember her father well. To keep my promise to my husband and not to let her feel lonely or hurt, I raised Jessica with all my might. Putting my needs second, I balanced work, house chores, and parenting, managing to send her to college even as a single parent. I might be biased, but Jessica turned out to be a beautiful, kind, and hardworking woman, excelling in her studies. She's my pride and joy. After graduating, she got a job at a corporation and started living on her own. I can't always rely on you, Mom. I'll start repaying you back, bit by bit. Don't worry about me. Just do your best. Eat properly, don't stay up late, and remember, I'm not a kid anymore, I'll be fine. What are you saying? You'll always be my precious child. On the eve of her move, Jessica and I talked about the past, the future, and her father until late into the night. We never ran out of memories to share, losing track of time. Even after she started living alone, my smartphone would frequently light up with her messages. From the struggles of unpacking and cooking, to her experiences at work and stories about her colleagues. Every message made me feel as if she was right there with me. Jessica must be feeling lonely in her first time living alone. But after half a year, the messages from her gradually became less frequent, changing from every 3 days to once a week. She's really doing her best. There's a saying that the absence of reliance is a good reliance. The lack of messages probably means that Jessica's days are fulfilling. Thinking this, even the tea I made for my husband seems to nod in agreement. When about 1.5 years had passed since Jessica started her job, on a warm, late autumn day, I received a call. It was Jessica, and as I answered, wondering what was up, she sounded excited, saying, It's been a while. Mom, listen, I want you to meet someone this Sunday. Are you free? Oh, it's been a while indeed. I'm free this Sunday. Great, I'll come home around noon, okay? Sure, that's fine. Be careful on your way. It's been a long time since I've seen you, Mom. You're gonna be surprised, see you then. After saying that, Jessica hung up, and I was left in silence. I wondered when was the last time I had a phone conversation with her. Her unusually happy tone also caught my attention, but when Sunday came, I was indeed surprised, just like Jessica said. At the door, Jessica appeared with a young man named Ethan Parker. He wasn't dressed casually but in a neat, casual suit, looking a bit tense. "Nice to meet you. I'm Ethan Parker, dating Jessica." He introduces himself, tall and slender, with a face as handsome as a model's. He gave the impression of a polite and good young man. "Oh, Jessica has been in your care. Please come in." I offered him guest slippers and invited them to the living room. As I made tea and we sat at the table, Jessica shared her recent news and introduced him. Then, blushing, she said, "The reason I wanted you to meet him is, I want to marry Ethan." Marry! Though I had a hunch, it still struck a chord to hear that Jessica had found someone. I maintained my composure and looked at Ethan, who now seemed more serious than before. "Yes, I proposed to Jessica recently. And we wanted to meet with you, her mother." After a brief silence, I said, "I see. I didn't know Jessica had such a wonderful person in her life." "Ethan, Jessica grew up without a father. I raised her all by myself." "Yes, Jessica told me she was raised by a single mother." "Jessica is my treasure, my only daughter. Will you truly protect and make her happy?" "Of course. I'm confident I can make her happier than anyone else in this world." Ethan responded confidently, not intimidated by my demeanor. Had he faltered here, I might not have consented to their marriage. "I understand. Please take good care of Jessica." When I said this, the two exchanged relieved glances and smiled happily. Seeing them like this, I naturally found myself smiling as well. I think he would have smiled in the same way if he were here. A few months after sending off a happy Jessica and Ethan, Jessica took a long break and came home. She happily talked about her work and Ethan, but occasionally, she would have a troubled expression, which worried me. When asked, she would avoid the topic and say, "It's nothing, Mom." Jessica has a habit of shrugging her shoulders when she wants to talk about something or is lying. She shrugged this time too, so I was sure something was bothering her. "Hey, Jessica, how about we visit that new cafe that just opened? This one here." I pointed to the cafe on my smartphone screen. Her eyes lit up. "Oh, I've been wanting to go there. They're known for their original coffee. It's popular at work too." Then it's settled. The next day, Jessica and I walked to the cafe in the cool air. It was deep into winter, and the brown fallen leaves crunched under our feet. We ordered coffee to go and walked for a while. "Mom, thanks for accepting Ethan and me. He seems sincere. Take good care of each other." When we reached a large park, Jessica started to open up. "Actually, I went to greet Ethan's parents. They didn't seem to think much of me." Her story went back a month. She had gone with Ethan to greet his parents, John and Linda. But they seemed skeptical of her from the start. "Hello, I'm Jessica Johnson. I'm dating Ethan." "Ethan, are you sure about this girl?" Linda interrupted Jessica's greeting. "What do you mean? Just look at her. She looks poor, her clothes, her makeup. She's not a match for Ethan." Instead of congratulations, they openly criticized Jessica. "Mom, that's rude. How can you say that about my girlfriend?" "You think so too, right?" Linda even sought agreement from John, who simply nodded in affirmation. "Oh, is your family very poor? Do your parents work?" "My mother works, and my father passed away when I was young." "A single mother? I thought as much." John seemed oddly satisfied and scoffed. "Dad? It must be for the money. Ethan, our family is of a distinguished lineage. You shouldn't be with this kind of woman." "How can you say that? Jessica is different. I know her better than anyone." "You're just naive. There are plenty of people who would marry for our wealth." Shockingly, John even suggested introducing Ethan to a daughter of an acquaintance. Linda agreed and seemed pleased with the idea. That's a good idea. After all, this girl's father works for a major listed company. She's not a match for a single-parent family. You think so too, right, Ethan? Seeing his mother happily agree, Ethan raised his voice. Enough, both of you. That day, the conversation went nowhere, and Ethan had to lead Jessica away from his parents' house. Later, Ethan told Jessica that both John and Linda had a strong sense of elitism. Jessica, I'm really sorry. My parents said such awful things and hurt you. He apologized repeatedly and promised to always protect her. Listening to this on a park bench, I was struggling to contain my anger. So, what did his parents say about the marriage? We went again last week, and despite their sarcasm, Ethan convinced them to accept us. Are you okay with that? Jessica bit her lip and shrugged. Yeah, I'm okay. We won't be living together, and I can handle it. All right. It was clear that the relationship between the Parkers and Jessica was strained. Even with Ethan's promise to protect her, there would be limits. Knowing the difficulties ahead, I wished I could advise her to reconsider the marriage. However, having already given my consent, that was no longer an option. Even in just this short period since the greeting, Jessica looked so downcast. The thought of her having to wear that sad expression for the foreseeable future was unbearable. About the meeting between both families, I think maybe I shouldn't attend. Why? Because I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. I'd rather not have the meeting if it's going to upset you. Until then, Jessica had been acting bravely, but now her eyes seemed to well up. Though she didn't cry, she was evidently trying to spare me from the same unpleasant feelings. Her kindness pained me, but I smiled. Don't worry about me. Let's have the meeting properly, so your marriage is recognized by everyone. Under the cold sky, Jessica and I sipped our cold coffee on our way back home. When Jessica told Ethan about wanting to go ahead with the meeting, he seemed very surprised and worried about her. You don't have to push yourself, he said. I'm fine. Mom doesn't mind either. If that's what you want, I'll talk to my parents about it. On the day of the meeting, Jessica and I went to the venue. We were silent, but I decided to face the situation with my head held high and my chest puffed out. We took a taxi to the designated famous hotel, taking deep breaths at the entrance. However, Jessica was still anxious. When the hotel was chosen, Linda had made a snide remark, adding to Jessica's unease. That famous hotel featured in commercials. I know it's a place unfamiliar to your family. Such unnecessary comments should have been brushed off, but Jessica took them to heart and completely shrank into herself. I gently embraced Jessica's shoulder, signaling with my eyes, it's going to be okay, and we started walking together. At the entrance, Ethan, who seemed to have arrived earlier, was waiting for the elevator. Thank you for adjusting your schedules to meet today. Ethan looked much more nervous than the last time we met, sweating even in the cold of winter. No, thank you. We appreciate your efforts today. Well, you might have heard from Jessica, but this hotel is where my father works, and... Ethan stuttered, clearly worried his parents might say something offensive. Given their attitude towards Jessica, I expected they would treat me the same. I replied with confidence. Yes, I am aware. There's no need to worry. Besides, you look more handsome when you're confident. Ethan looked up sharply, just as the elevator doors opened, and an announcement indicated we should proceed upstairs. We stepped in and rode up to the designated floor. Entering the assigned room, John and Linda were already seated, smirking in a way that seemed both creepy and amused. Glancing at the table, I noticed that only 3 sets of dishes were prepared on our side. I immediately understood this subtle form of harassment. Oh, we've been waiting for you. Please take a seat. Oh? Just the 2 of you? We are a single-parent family. I replied, lifting the corners of my eyes, trying to stay calm. But Linda's smile turned into a sneer. Oh, right. Why don't you take this home in a container? You must be poor. Single mothers must have such low incomes, always hungry, right? That's right. The income of single-parent families is well known to be low. Linda covered her mouth with her hand, barely holding back her laughter. Despite the shocking comments, I remained unmoved. Seeing this, Ethan couldn't help but cry out. "Dad, Mom, stop it right now. This is too disrespectful." At that moment, Jessica tapped my shoulder. "This is terrible. Mom, let's go." "Why?" "If it means my mom, who sacrificed everything for me, has to suffer like this, I don't want to get married." Hearing this, Ethan turned around in shock. "Jessica!" I looked at them and said firmly, "That's not necessary. Just wait a moment." Then, a female staff member approached from behind with a lunchbox-sized pack and offered it to Linda. "Please, take this to go." Linda and John were taken aback, looking utterly confused. "If you're concerned about low incomes, please, take this." "What?" "At least Mrs. Johnson here is far from being poor." The staff member, speaking clearly, placed the pack down and stepped back gracefully. Linda and John were indignant. "You! How dare you do this?" "That's right. You're fired, fired." "Right, dear?" "Both of you, please calm down. She's an old friend of mine. The rude ones here are you too." The woman turned to me, smiled briefly, and said, "The division head is always so busy." "Division head!" Linda and John's reactions were comically exaggerated, almost tumbling off their chairs. John was sweating profusely, not just on his forehead but all over his face. I hadn't intended to hide it, but I am the daughter of the president of the group company that owns this famous hotel. I have worked for this company for many years, continuing even after marriage. When I was pregnant with Jessica, I took maternity leave like any other employee and raised her while working in place of my husband. By the time Jessica entered college, my efforts were recognized, and I was promoted to division head, thanks to recommendations from colleagues, but this couple was unaware of it. "Are both of you listening?" I addressed the two lying on the floor with a firm voice. "Today, we came here to discuss the marriage between my dear daughter and your son, Ethan. It seems you have spoken very poorly of my daughter." I glared at them, causing John and Linda to shudder. "I replaced my husband, who passed away from illness when my daughter was young, working hard to provide her with both love and education." Ethan swallowed nervously. "I trust my daughter and the person she has chosen. Even if they come from a family that judges others by income and behaves rudely, I see Ethan as a respectful and fine young man, an important addition to our family." I paused for a breath before continuing. "I believe you too care for your child. So, I ask again, do you accept the marriage of my daughter and Ethan?" The room fell silent. John and Linda were trembling, and Ethan seemed to hold his breath. Jessica had never seen this side of me before. She was speechless behind me. "Well?" Linda looked resentfully at John. He, pale-faced, adjusted his posture and hurriedly said, "Of course, division head. We look forward to a close relationship in the future. I am here today not as a division head, but as Jessica's mother," I firmly stated, looking at John. "And if we talk about work, aren't you soon to leave this place?" "What do you mean?" I had already investigated John's reputation within the company. When Jessica told me Ethan's father was John Parker, the name rang a bell. His disdainful attitude towards Jessica and being a hotel employee was a dead giveaway. He had a bad reputation in the hotel, and I had often heard about John's high-handed behavior towards his subordinates. Additionally, he was reported to be absent from work under the pretext of meetings, and a personnel hearing was imminent. "That's why you should really reflect on your own actions," I told the speechless John. Linda suddenly stood up, her face red with rage, and lunged at me with a wild scream. But when I easily dodged, she fell over with a groan, like a squashed frog. To Linda, who was sprawled on the floor, I delivered a final warning. "Also, know this, if you ever interfere with Jessica and Ethan's happiness, I won't stay silent." After pinning down the helpless couple, I urged Jessica and Ethan to leave with me. Of course, I left their handling to my childhood friend. Half a year passed, and it was now summer. The sticky humidity was tough to bear, especially in my 50s. The weather forecast promised another day of intense heat, making an umbrella essential outdoors. As I walked to the supermarket, I thought about what happened afterward. After the meeting, Ethan had apologized to Jessica and me several times. "I'm really sorry for my parents' disrespectful behavior." He was so apologetic he even bowed to the floor, prompting me to quickly lift him up. "You don't need to go that far. Your sincerity is apparent. It's just so embarrassing. I don't want anything to do with such parents anymore." "But they are the ones who raised you, aren't they?" "No, my aunt and uncle raised me. My parents left me with them until I went to college." I had always wondered why Ethan's character was so different from his parents' arrogance. It turns out his aunt and uncle, who raised him, were decent people. Recently, Ethan formally cut ties with his parents after they came begging for money. After the meeting, Linda called Ethan in a panic. "Ethan, your dad lost his job. They said it was due to job negligence." But Ethan responded indifferently. "That's tough. Don't talk like it's someone else's problem. We're out of money, you need to send us some." "Mom, I know about it. Uncle told me, you have a spending habit, right?" "What are you talking about?" "If you could just get rid of that habit, wouldn't our lives be more comfortable? Please stop relying on me. That guy, always saying unnecessary things." After that, there were several more phone calls. Linda had exhausted her savings because of her spending habit, and even John's retirement fund was running low. Struggling financially, Linda and John were not only asking for money but also insisted on speaking to the division manager. They kept calling all the time, morning, noon, and night, so eventually, Ethan's patience ran out. "Both of you, just stop it. I don't want to cause trouble for my wife or mother-in-law." Saying that, he abruptly ended the call and blocked their numbers. Not only that, Ethan changed his cell phone number and moved to a new apartment with Jessica, changing their address. Of course, he didn't tell his parents, so John and Linda had no way of knowing what happened to Ethan and Jessica afterwards. This removed any disturbances in the couple's happy married life. From what Jessica told me, since then, they have been living peaceful days together. As for me, I've managed to build a good relationship with the newlyweds, having meals together 2 or 3 times a month. Also, this incident made me realize a big misunderstanding. I had been working hard to ensure Jessica didn't face hardships raising her on my own, but in doing so, I had completely stopped going on trips, which was my hobby. Jessica thought she was the reason I gave up my hobby. My efforts to spare Jessica any worry or hardship ended up making her worried about me. "Don't worry about me from now on. I want you to spend time and money for yourself, Mom." Until Jessica said that, I was enjoying living alone at home, but since then, I started going on trips on weekends. I, who loved domestic travel, started visiting places I wanted to see and places with fond memories. Strangely enough, as I worked hard in my daily job, I began to feel it's okay to spend time and money on myself. Moreover, exploring recent lodging facilities has even benefited my work. Projects have been progressing more smoothly, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Thinking of this as thanks to Jessica, I finished paying at the store and left. Today's shopping was also for ingredients to cook dinner together with the 3 of us. Looking up, I saw Jessica coming from the opposite side. "Mom, are you okay? Don't overdo it, let me carry that for you." Jessica hurried over and easily lifted the shopping bag in my right hand. "Oh, thank you. Shall we go then?" "Yeah, Ethan's gonna come right after he finishes work. He's been looking forward to your summer vegetable curry," Jessica said, smiling sweetly. "I'll have to make plenty then." Recently, there was happy news. Jessica is pregnant. This made not only me and Ethan happy, but Jessica as well. I'm secretly planning to send clothes and toys for the grandchild, keeping it a surprise for the two. Though I wonder if it's too early, I know the child will be here before we know it. I'm already eagerly awaiting the day I can meet this new life.